Yup, let me explain why I think Kate Denson is the trapper's mother. First, let's read Dance With Me's flavor text. Another show's off and running. Dance with me cause there's a storm a-comin'. Follow my boots, try to keep up. Dance with me until sun up. This is the beginning of our story, and this verse describes the early life of Kate Denson, soon to be Kate McMillan. Touring America and playing music. When short on money though, she decides to marry a man from the small town of Weeks named Archie McMillan. Rise and shine, work hard, carve out your name, take aim, pull the trigger. Hit the bullseye for fame. Know the value of faith and family and don't you complain. Open wide your windows of opportunity. She marries a rich man to help her dream come true, widening her windows of opportunity. Let's look into Trapper's Tome 1 lore named Awakening. In this lore we find out that the Trapper, or Evan McMillan's mother, is killed when he's young. It's not stated how young he is when she dies, but it's young enough that all he remembers of her is a few things. These things being the fact she has light hair, so probably blonde. She's artistic, which could mean a lot of things. She had a soft voice, and also that she is the opposite of his father, Archie McMillan, who's basically just the worst person ever. He's abusive, he's cruel, and it's heavily suggested that he murdered Evan's mother, or his wife. Before we look more into the death of Evan's mother, let's just establish why Kate is already a decent fit. First, she fits the physical description: light hair, blue eyes, and the fact that she's said to encourage Evan's creativity in the lore could easily suggest creativity of her own, more than likely, which Kate has, of course. A big thing that is mentioned though is that she's the opposite of Archie, so she's quite pure basically. Kate is a free spirit and mentioned repeatedly to be kind and caring, so description wise it all lines up so far. That's clearly not enough though. I would predict Kate is somewhere between 18 to 25, so she could have easily feasibly given birth to Evan and raised him till at least the age of 3 before she supposedly died. It's also very plausible that Archie McMillan would have a much younger wife due to his social standing and the fact that he's so manipulative. It's revealed at the end of the Tome 1 lore by Archie McMillan that he drowned his wife, Evan's mother. After his mother's supposed drowning, Archie goes on to kill his brother, or Evan's uncle. This all seems to happen in very quick succession though. It's also here where it's made clear that Archie is a cruel man. Before, it's more outlined that the townspeople are simply jealous of the McMillans' wealth, but not necessarily scared of them yet. It just seems a bit out of the blue for Archie to suddenly murder his wife, no? He might have been concerned for the influence she had on Evan, making him too soft, but I mean, that's the person he married. He married her knowing she was a caring person. We know that the entity originally planned to take Archie instead of Evan, which is probably the cause for both the murder of Evan's uncle and Evan's mother. The entity only changing its mind to take Evan in the last moments as Evan had more raw rage and emotion for it to feed on and use, which is also why the Trapper has hooks and such piercing his skin as he resisted the entity's influence initially. So here's my alternative interpretation of what happened. First, on the day of Evan's mother's death, herself and Archie were down at a stream. That's normal so far. Whilst there, the entity reaches out and attempts to take Archie. Possibly at this point it wants him as a survivor, as he's not corrupted yet. However, Archie manages to escape its grasp and run back into the woods. Evan's mother isn't as lucky and is taken instead. This leads to Archie slowly going crazy due to having direct contact with the entity, which gradually corrupts and crumbles his mind. This would also explain his sudden complete change in how he acts and why he suddenly starts murdering people. This causes him to grow suspicious and paranoid, murdering his brother over being too soft, treating his son harshly, finally convincing Evan to go to the mine and kill all his workers. This would also explain why Evan was chosen over his father. Potentially his father became too corrupted, so the entity used this corruption to sway Evan over enough to commit the mining explosion to then take him full of rage. Because again, it seems strange otherwise for Archie to marry this woman, have a caring brother, and it's only after the point of her death where his anger truly comes into its all. It just seems so sudden, is what I'm saying. In regards to his mother, who was now in the entity's realm, the entity found it hard to control her or influence her, as she effectively had too pure of a soul, too much good to be fully manipulated, which is a big factor for how the whole realm functions. Now we can look at Kate's perk flavor text for Boil Over, which describes her time within the entity's realm. Buck and wild, swing to be free, your hands just can't keep a hold of me. Based on this, my theory is that the entity, as Boil Over suggests, was not capable of controlling Kate, Evan's mother at this point, and therefore throws her out of its world and back into the real world. However, due to the time displacement that happens once you enter, she exits at a completely different point in time. Further, she can't recall her past life, as when she entered the entity's realm, it wiped her memory. We know that the entity is capable of wiping someone's memory. This is in Benedict Baker's journals. He literally says how he forgets things, or he can recall the repetition of the trials. However, it doesn't appear to entirely wipe the memory. So my thoughts are that her memory was wiped back to just before she married and had a child with Archie McMillan, and so she simply remembers touring America as a musician, which is what she was doing prior to marrying him. The memory loss thing may seem like it's out of nowhere, but I have some evidence. First, Kate's Tome 5 lore is named Back to Zero, which is an apt way to describe a memory wipe. This is also the tome in which she searches for the entity based on some vague feeling she has. We have other cosmetics also that talk about breaking free. The Free Songbird cosmetic reads, a sleek bandana top with a free spirit print. There's too many places to see to stay in one place. Break free, Songbird. It specifically here has a reference to staying in one place too and breaking out of it, so the entity's realm. I want to next call your attention to her tattoos. The first is a group of flowers on her left arm, the second is a flower on her right thigh, the third is a crescent moon on the right side of her chest. The images on her tattoos are oddly similar to the depiction of the entity's realm. The flowers and their design is similar to the cankers during the Eternal Blight event, and the crescent moon, well, there's a moon on most of the maps, I guess. My theory, however, is that these aren't tattoos but are actually the entity's corruption manifesting itself on Kate's body. A bit like how the entity punishes the Trapper, it punishes Kate for refusing corruption by scarring its imagery onto her body. Notice also where the tattoos are placed. Alternative to where Kate's tattoos or afflictions are also Trapper's injuries. Where Kate's left arm is tattooed, Trapper's right arm is the one that has the most considerable amount of hooks puncturing it. The right of her chest has the moon, where Trapper's largest claw marks are on the left side of his chest. Finally, where Kate has a flower on her right leg, Trapper has more binding on his left, potentially due to an injury being there. We have another outfit named Small Town Girl 2, which reads, a casual outfit for a fun day in the ranch. It is both practical and fashionable, just a small town girl living in a lonely world. This is a reference to the song Don't Stop Believin' by Journey on the album Escape. Further, if we look at the lyrics, there's two major interesting points. First, a singer in a smoky room. Kate is effectively a singer within the fog. Maybe something there. However, a bit more broadly, we can take the song as a description of the trials as a whole. I won't go too far into it, but hopefully you'll get what I mean. Also, the song's title, Don't Stop Believin', is a perfect example of describing how the trials work, running off of hope. The survivors need to keep believing they can reach the exit and escape. Okay, so what happens after she is kicked out of the entity's realm? Well, she kind of has a weird state where she's incredibly confused about who she is and where she's going. At this point, her memory of Archie and Evan is entirely gone. The beginning of her tome lore in Memory 3221, we can read, hitting zero. That's why she returns to the forest time and time again, to let go of her anxieties, to let go of her problems, to take in the scent of fresh pine and let go of her conscious self, to let go of everything and listen to her muse. She's been out of touch with herself for a while, lost in a game to please everyone except herself, lost in a game, pleasing everyone except herself, returning to the forest, cough, Macmillan Estate, and out of touch with herself for a while. Further, in Memory 3223, she waits for an inspiration that never comes. Nothing except that lonely, ominous melody. The more she tries to strum something else, the louder it echoes in her mind. She stops for a long, silent moment, but the tune doesn't. She closes her eyes and tries to force it out of her mind, but it's not in her mind. It's coming from the cave. Here we could assume maybe that after being scarred by the entity and already experiencing its realm, she's kind of getting weird flashbacks or nightmares, and effectively it's slowly eating away at her creativity and health. And Memory 3224, 3 hours and still nothing but the foreboding melody. More than anything, she wishes she had taken some time to realign herself and make sure she was spending her life's energy on something real and true to who she was. Instead, she squandered her life's energy on acts and routines and her piggy bank. She prepares to count down but sees a symbol on the ground before her, glowing and pulsing with the tune, pulsing like the heartbeat of some primordial ancient thing. She closes her eyes and opens them again, and the symbol is gone. Could this be her recalling her prior life, her time spent married to Archie McMillan, concerning herself with the piggy bank, losing herself and her true driving force, now left only with this slow corruption building inside of her, and further what appears to be entity-induced hallucinations where she's now seeing symbols, probably the entities. In Memory 3225, Kate encounters the entity again directly. She approaches the deep and ominous cave, wondering who or what is calling her. A vague memory tugs at her. tells her she's done this before. She has a sense that she knows what she's going to find but somehow has forgotten. She has a vague memory of doing this before. She knows what she'll find but she's somehow forgotten. It feels like this aligns pretty well, so shall we timeline now? Hopefully this hasn't been too hard to follow up to this point. So, the timeline. Kate leaves home to go touring, playing music around the country. She's somewhere between 18 to 25. She enjoys it, but she ends up struggling, leading her to the town of Weeks, where she meets Archie McMillan, a rich businessman and landowner who can provide her with the stability needed for her to continue with her music. The woods in which his estate is situated brings her lots of inspiration. Archie McMillan marries Kate, and together they have Evan. One day when they're down at a stream, the entity attempts to take Archie, gripping onto him but failing to take him. Archie escapes and Kate is taken instead. The entity potentially misjudges Kate as an easy target to exploit her good nature. The entity's touch corrupts Archie. He tells Evan that his mother drowned as he's scared and unsure of what he really saw. Evan was so young that he can barely remember what she looks like aside her soft voice, light hair, and artistic tendencies. As the years go by, the influence of the entity begins to corrupt Archie and it manifests through anger and rage, resulting in Archie murdering his brother and later ordering Evan to cause the mining accident, which results in Evan being taken instead. Meanwhile, Kate is not a good asset to the entity as she isn't corruptible and is simply too pure in intention and immovable in hope. The entity attempts to change this but fails, spitting her out of its realm, leaving scars on her of its own image as punishment. It further injures Evan in a similar way to his mother in annoyance of her defiance. Due to time displacement that occurs in the entity's realm, Kate exits the entity's realm about 50 plus years later than when she was taken. Her earliest memories are at a point where she can play guitar to a relatively good degree and she's been touring America. However, now she has recollections of the entity's realm through brief hallucinations and thoughts that influence her music to be far darker than before. Kate eventually makes her way back to the town of Weeks and to the McMillan estate, to the woods where she used to play in her past life. It's here where the dark force takes a hold of her. The entity captures her again. This time though, she is corruptible as she's been in the entity's realm before, and although still a free spirit, she has the heavy darkness of a lost prior life weighing on her heart. And there we go, and we're up for speed. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed episode 3 of Do I Belong in Crota's Pren. Thanks, and goodbye. An additional thank you to LHPL3 as well as my other members for supporting the channel.